Hey guys, Breg here, and welcome to the first episode of Farming Fables. This is a series where I show you one of my favourite farming spots, fast forward it, and farm for an hour, and at the end we'll look at how much gold we made. In the meantime, I will be talking about any WoW topic which I feel is relevant, or that I just want to discuss. Today we're going to be discussing the huge changes to the Mythic Plus dungeon system that are coming in patch 7.2. Now in my opinion, the Mythic Plus system is the best new system in Legion. It's actually been my most enjoyed part of Legion because they've managed to make dungeons actually relevant again. In Warlords of Draenor, and even in Mists of Pandaria, if you weren't doing challenge modes, which most people weren't, they were really pretty irrelevant. There was no real need to do them, and they were just super easy and a waste of time. But now, Mythic Dungeons are actually fun. Personally, I don't have time to be in a raiding guild, and as I'm on a new account most of the time, I don't have too many Battle.net friends, apart from the people who have added me, who watch my videos. Hi guys. But yeah, so I don't have time to sort of run organised raids, but the Mythic Plus system gives me sort of an alternative to that. We haven't had a difficult dungeon system really since TBC, and I really like the way it's been implemented. The whole Affix system is really fun, and especially when you get to Mythic Plus 10 with Fortified and Tyrannical, it adds a whole other sort of difficulty to the system and requires you to actually have good damage, good healing, and pay attention to boss mechanics. Anyway, the latest PTR build has implemented a lot of new changes to the system, so we're going to be going over that, and we're going to start with the new affixes that are being added. First off is Bursting, a level 4 affix. When slain, non-boss enemies explode, causing all players to suffer 10% of their maximum health in damage over 4 seconds, and this effect stacks. This is pretty cool. It's not too hard to deal with because it's only 10% of your health over 4 seconds, but since the effect stacks, it's going to mean huge pulls are no longer an option when this affix is up. When you're running a Maw of Souls, for example, the tank will often pull the entire load of adds up into the first boss. And with this affix, that's definitely not going to be an option because, well, you're all just going to die basically. And it's a level 4 affix, so it shouldn't be too hard, but at least it's going to add an interesting sort of mechanic to the game when it's up. Next up we have Fell Explosives. This affix is level 7 affix. Creatures have a chance to summon an explosive orb at a nearby location that will explode, inflicting damage of 50% of the player's maximum health. Now I'm not sure whether you can attack this orb or not. If you can, then I guess everyone will just switch to it, just like a usual raid mechanic, and kill it before it explodes. If you can't attack it, then everyone's just going to have to run away from it before it explodes. And maybe you can't even run away from it, and it's just a healing affix where you're going to have to deal with this 50% debuff basically. But I presume you're just going to be able to run away from it, which is pretty cool. I like the movement mechanics. I actually really like the volcanic mechanic. Volcanic mechanic. But yeah, I actually enjoy that. I know lots of people don't, especially melee, but I play as a healer and it just gives me something fun to do. When I see that, I'm like, oh shit, gotta run. Though I do know that it can bug out and sometimes you can't see it, which is very annoying. But this doesn't look like it's going to have those issues because it's a huge explosive orb. You're not going to miss it. Next up we have Quaking, another level 7 affix. Periodically, players will quake, inflicting damage of 20% of the player's maximum health and interrupting spellcasts of themselves and nearby allies. Now, I think this is my least favourite of all the new affixes because it's just a bit weird. There seems to be no way you can avoid it. You're just randomly going to get a quake and you'll lose health and you'll interrupt your spellcast and your allies' spellcast. It's just, I don't really see the point in it. It's just going to be annoying and there's no skill involved. It's just an annoying thing for the healer to deal with, an annoying thing for the casters to deal with. However, hopefully it allows you to move away from the person with quaking, and you know, then it's just like another sort of a volcanic, another sort of Fell Explosives kind of affix where you know, someone gets quaking, everyone has to run away from them, or the quaking person has to run away. And yeah, I guess that'd be kind of cool, but still, it just seems a bit annoying for casters. And yeah. Last up on the new affixes, we have Grievous. While below 90% health, players are afflicted with Grievous Wound. Again, this is not the most exciting of affixes, but as a healer, it's quite cool to have another basically pure healing affix where you've got to keep everyone topped up the whole time, and if you don't, you're going to find it hard to keep up. You know, there's a lot of these sort of mechanics in raid fights, but there's not often them in many dungeons, so this should be pretty cool, and it will interact interestingly with some mechanics, especially with the fortified affix. Say on Neltharion's Lair, fortified is pretty difficult to deal with the ads. They'll do a lot of damage, and it's pretty difficult to keep all your allies alive, especially above 90% health. So if those two go together, that's going to be really hard to deal with. But then again, the whole point of Mythic Plus is it's supposed to be a challenge, so it should be interesting. Speaking of fortified, the damage bonus of the ads has been lowered to 30% when it was 40%. So I think that's basically a nerf, because fortified was pretty much always harder than tyrannical in terms of the plus 10 affix. So I guess they're trying to even it out a bit. And yeah, like I said, in some dungeons like Neltharion's Lair, the ads could be really hard to deal with fortified. At the same time, Tyrannical's damage bonus has been lowered to 15%, was 20%. I don't really see the point in this. I know it was pretty easy to deal with Tyrannical. I mean, it's only a 20% damage buff, it's not that much. But I guess with people doing harder and harder level Mythic Pluses, you know, there's people who've done like level 25 and things ridiculous like that. So I suppose then the bosses might just one-shot them, so they had to lower Tyrannical. I don't know. I don't really see the point in it, but I guess it's kind of good if you're doing those super high level Mythic Pluses. It has also been revealed that Overflowing has been removed as an affix, and yeah, I kind of saw that coming. It was really easy to deal with as a healer. You know, it's supposed to be a healing affix, but all it did was occasionally put a sort of healing absorb onto people when you're overhealed. And you know, I'm a resto druid, I have hots up all the time, and even then it hardly ever even occurred, and when it did, you didn't even notice it. It was basically just irrelevant. But I suppose that explains why they're putting the new healing affix in, Grievous. It's basically just replacing that, and the Grievous one sounds a bit more difficult to deal with, and you know, basically a lot better affix, so I'm glad about that change. Another great change is to bolstering, where the range has been reduced to 30 yards when it was 45 yards. So that's a pretty decent reduction in the range, and yeah, I understand why they've done that as well. It was really annoying when an ad that was pretty far away from the one you were killing still managed to get bolstered, and then, you know, the whole dungeon basically got bolstered, and you had an ad with like 10 times bolstering doing 200% more damage or whatever. It was really annoying. Especially in, say, Halls of Valor, when you have those massive trash packs, you'd try and CC one of them and pull the others away, so at least there wouldn't be huge bolstering stacks. But even then, the one that was CC'd still got the bolstering, because 45 yards is quite a long way. So like the Blizzard have said, they're making this change so CC is going to be viable when bolstering's up, and it's basically going to make CC more important, which is always a good thing in my opinion. They've also changed Necrotic. The rots will now expire after leaving combat. Its duration has also been reduced to 8 seconds, whereas it was 10 seconds. I think this is more for tank balancing, because basically with Necrotic, the tank needs to get all the ads together, you know, get the threat, and then try and run away until Necrotic leaves, otherwise you just can't heal them. But this was a lot easier for some tanks than others, so now when it's only 8 seconds instead of 10, it's going to be easier for all the tanks to just kind of run away and let that debuff run off. They've also made a couple of other small changes to some affixes. Sanguine radius has been increased to 8 yards. Again, I understand that it was pretty irrelevant anyway, Sanguine, and at least now you're actually going to have to move away from it instead of just, you know, accidentally moving away because it was in such a small radius. And lastly, skittish threat reduction has been lowered to 75%, was 80%. Again, this is just a slight nerf to skittish because a lot of the tanks, especially some of the newer tanks, found it really hard to deal with. So this is just going to make it slightly easier. Now they've also changed the artifact power rewards from Mythic Keystone dungeons. So longer dungeons such as Halls of Valor now award a proportionately higher amount of artifact power, whereas shorter dungeons such as Maw of Souls now award a proportionately lower amount of artifact power. I know this is a huge change, especially for the serious raiders who felt they had to run hundreds and hundreds of Maw of Souls just to cap out their artifact weapon, because Maw of Souls was the most efficient way of getting artifact power. Now running the same dungeon over and over again just isn't fun, and this is going to make it a lot more rewarding for those players who just want to spam mythic dungeons because they can do basically any that they want. It's also going to make people who have some of the longer dungeons such as Halls of Valor, it's going to make their keystones relevant again, because before, if you got a Halls of Valor, it was basically just not having a keystone because no one wanted to run it. It took so long and it gave the same sort of artifact power. Another very interesting change is the fact that artifact power bonuses have now been added to your weekly chest rewards. That's the chest you get in your order hall after completing the Mythic Plus dungeon during the week. And you're now going to get a huge amount of artifact power, and that's going to increase based on the highest level Mythic Keystone you completed. I was looking at the forums for some of the people who've checked this out, and apparently you get up to 1 million artifact power in your weekly cash just from completing a plus 15 dungeon. So this is going to be really useful, and it's also going to make doing high level mythic dungeons, more rewarding for those players. It's also going to make ults a lot more rewarding, because instead of having to spam a load of mythic dungeons just to try and keep up with artifact power, you can just do one high level mythic plus on your ult and you're going to get a huge amount of artifact power without having to spend too much time on it. Lastly is the stuff that most of us already knew, as in the mythic dungeons will now be able to direct you to Lower Karazhan, Upper Karazhan, and the Cathedral of Eternal Night, which is the new dungeon. I think it's great they're splitting Karazhan up. It will give people who haven't done it much the chance to be able to run it in heroics and normals, and as a mythic plus I think Karazhan will be pretty interesting. Some of the bosses might be pretty difficult and it will be definitely very fun to do. Oh, they also added 60 seconds to the Blackrook hold timer. I don't really know why. To be honest, I really hate Blackrook hold. I never run it, even if I get it. I know some people quite like it, but I just really don't like it. I don't like the bosses, I don't like the trash. So maybe not a lot of people were running it, and that's why they've added timer to it. 60 seconds, I don't know, but yeah, I'm probably not going to run it anyway still, because I just don't like that dungeon. But that's about it, guys. I'm really excited for these changes. It's going to make Mythic Plus relevant and continue to be a really exciting part of the game in the future, which I'm really happy about. I absolutely love the system, and the fact that they're updating it and making it better basically is something I'm very pleased with. Now, before we look at how much gold I made from this Zul'Farrak run, please let me know what you think about my new series. It's an interesting idea. I'm trying to combine sort of gold making with more discussion videos. It will help me reach a wider audience and hopefully give you guys something a bit more interesting to look at whilst I'm doing a discussion video. So yeah, let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions, anything I should do differently, whether I should just stop doing it completely, and yeah. So that's it. We farmed for an hour, well 58 minutes in Zul'Farrak, and we got 33,000 gold worth of items, which is okay. It's not amazing. I've done better in Zul'Farrak before. We didn't get very lucky, but we did get a few pieces. We've got a couple of nice transmog pieces, and we got a couple of rare patterns which sell, but apart from that, didn't get too lucky. But yeah, 33k, an hour farm. I really like Zul'Farrak because you can just pull the mobs and AoE them all down. It's really quick, and they do have a chance to drop some pretty good stuff. But yeah, thanks for watching, and until next time, see ya.